welcome to the interview on France 24. My guest is Axelle LEMAIRE. She's French Minister for Digital Affairs. Thank you very much for being with us. I'd like to start with your background, Axelle LEMAIRE, because you are an international politician in France. You grew up in Canada and then you studied in France, in Paris and in Montpellier. You started your political career in London as a researcher at the House of Commons, and you were appointed a Minister for Digital Affairs a year and a half ago. Digital affairs is very wide. It includes the French tech, it includes the GAFA, Google, Apple, Facebook, Amazon, the smart cities, and we're in Paris right now at the Palais du Congrès at a Smart Cities Forum. So will tomorrow's city be fully interactive?
Yes, and interactive means both interacting with the connected devices, for example, collecting data about passengers and how they travel, but it's also interaction with the citizens themselves and the way we decide, meaning politicians will have to be more interactive with the public.
South Korea is apparently the champion with the city of Songdo. France is quite behind. I don't think there's like a real pilot project of this scale. Is there?
Maybe not of that scale, but I would say that the challenges ahead for all the big cities in the world are the same, because they're becoming bigger and bigger and rural population are moving to the cities. So the question now is how to use technologies to better manage resources at a time where natural resources become scarce, become scarce, and we need to use them in a better way, not more resources, but better management of these resources. It's true for the energy, for water, for transport. And so in France, the initiatives and the projects often come from the local authorities. So Lyon is a good example, or Toulouse. So it may be not at the scale of a huge city like the one in South Korea, but certainly there are initiatives being taken and supported, including financially, by the French government.
So the problem is the so-called smart cities might be vulnerable to cyber attacks. What should be done to protect people from that?
You're right. The smart cities are both a fantastic source of economic opportunities, I believe, and of a better life, daily life for citizens, but it's also a potential threat, especially for private life. Hence the importance of protecting personal data and respecting private life, and we're working very hard on that subject in France. I'm preparing a bill on the subject to enhance the level of protection of personal data, but we're also working hard at the European level, and the French government's position is to say, let's make sure that by harmonizing the rules in Europe, which is very important, we're not lowering the level of protection. But I would say cybersecurity is also another economic opportunity. We have performing companies in France, both huge actors and small startups in that field, and we're helping them to grow.
But for its interactivity, France ranks only 14th upon European countries. Apparently the fast broadband is not very efficient compared to fast broadband in the other countries. Why is that?
So if you look at the figures at the moment, it is true, but then if you look at how these figures will be in a few years' time, it's going to be very different, because we've launched the most ambitious program of connecting the whole country. It will certainly change with massive public and private investment taking place precisely at this moment, with optic fiber being deployed all across the country, which will make France probably one of the most connected country in the world within the next 5, 6, 7 years.
Has French tech become a label?
The French tech is, I think, a recognized label now in France, for sure, and hopefully in the rest of the world as well. Why is that? Because at last we all feel proud of belonging to a startup and tech community that is recognized abroad as being performing with successful startups, BlaBlaCar, Six Fox, Sarenza. And so that label, the French Tech, which was given by the government, really helped gather the different actors of each local ecosystem in France and help them obtain markets abroad and obtain financing and attract investors abroad.
But it's still harder to finance them in France than it is to finance them in London, for example, or even in the US.
It is one of the obstacles met by the young startups. It's to have access to fundings. I would say that problem is true of France as it is of other countries in Europe and in the rest of the world. The money is still a lot in the Silicon Valley. So what we need to do is convince foreign investors that France is an attractive country and that they should not miss the opportunity of investing in the local startups here.
Why don't they invest more, do you think? Isn't it for tax reasons?
These signs are very positive. Last year, only in 2014, the number and level of foreign investment in the country raised by 12%, and all the big web actors decided to invest either by opening research centers, creating dedicated investment funds in France, or being present in the ecosystem. So things are clearly moving in the right direction. We need to put all the efforts still in trying to help the startups to become to scale up, to become bigger and larger companies.
And because the image of France abroad is still the country of huge taxes, isn't that a problem?
And the French government has worked a lot on reducing the level of corporate tax. We've also reformed the labor market. What I realized, and I tend to travel a lot.
We're still very far from the UK or the US, countries that you know very well.
Well, when you look at the level of taxation in the US, it is organized in a different way. But in the end, this could be discussed, between the local taxes, the federal taxes,
for corporates.
But the reality is that in 2 years' time, the level of corporate tax in France will be the same than in the average of the rest of the European countries, and the cost of labor now is lower than the one in Germany, for example. What I realize is that the perception on the country is still pretty wrong, because there's a gap, a discrepancy between the reality, the economic and social reality in France, and the way it is still perceived abroad, especially in Anglo-Saxon countries, I'm afraid.
And maybe in the French tech, more specifically, probably. You were saying preparing the Digital Act for France. It was supposed to be discussed this fall. It will finally be discussed next year. So why was it delayed?
It's a wide bill. It's ambitious, and it's for institutional reasons very much interministerial. So it's not only my ministry concerned, but it's many different ministries involved in preparing that text. So it takes time, but in a couple of weeks I'm going to launch the website where the text will be published, and not only be rendered public, but also will be open to suggestions and possible amendments by the public. So this is new.
Everybody included?
Anyone. This is the first time ever that a piece of legislation will be open to suggestions before the official parliamentary debate. So we're also innovating in the way we're governing the country. But the text will be presented in Parliament at the beginning of next year.
So many from the digital sector, as you know, highly criticized the Security Act, which is kind of the Patriot Act à la française, I would say. What are you going to do for freedom in the internet facing this security problem?
One of the answers is to protect personal data. And it's important to understand the difference between targeting potential terrorists, which is a matter of public security and order, and of protecting the general population by protecting their personal data. Another answer, which is what we're doing in the government, action is supporting open models, for example, open source or access to scientific publications, or promoting open data, which is the opening and use and reuse of data produced by administrations, by the state.
So that is key in your project?
That is key. The first chapter of the text I'm working on is about an economy of data, and one of the conditions is opening public data to the public, but also to innovative companies that can then reuse these data. That's the key of the future for the digital economy.
What about GAFAs, Google, Apple, Facebook, Amazon? How do you want to regulate them, and when are they going to pay taxes in France?
So many questions pending with the GAFAs. Taxation, paying their corporate tax in the country, protecting personal data. Do they respect the French law on privacy? For example, respecting consumer law, respecting competition law, because
many
some of
things
them
they don't respect, basically.
some of them are in a monopolistic position. Right. So the question now, which is actually being examined in Brussels at the moment, is whether they're using and abusing their dominant position on the market. It's important to understand that by regulating, what we want to ensure is to give a legal framework for all the companies to have access to the market. So we're actually want to make sure that the conditions are the same and the opportunities are the same for all the various companies, be them French, European, or international. So there are many issues being discussed when it comes to taxation. Yes, we are looking for these companies to pay the adequate level of taxes, corporate taxes in France, which is not the case at the moment.
Thank you, Axelle LEMAIRE.
Thank you.
And thanks to you for watching. Stay tuned.